My father-in-law makes in 1 month what you make in 10 years. That's the difference between success and failure, Dad. My daughter Sarah's words echoed through the room. 40 guests at our Thanksgiving dinner. 40 pairs of eyes locked onto me, waiting for my reaction. Her millionaire father-in-law, Stephen Chase, just smiled. That smug look of triumph. It made me clench my fists under the table. Before we continue, subscribe to William's Revenge Stories. Hit the notification bell because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Andrew Miller. I'm 62 years old. For 37 of those years, I was a literature professor at a large university in Chicago. I didn't build a financial empire. I'm not on the cover of business magazines. My legacy is the minds I helped shape, the books I taught them to love, and the quiet sacrifice I made for my only daughter. But that night, November 2022, in Sarah's luxury home in the suburbs of Chicago, I discovered that all my sacrifice meant less than nothing to her. The dinner had started 3 hours earlier. Linda, my wife of 60 years, insisted on bringing her famous apple pie, the same one Sarah loved as a child. We arrived at 7 p.m. sharp, just like always. My daughter's home was a modern 3-story structure, huge windows overlooking a perfect garden. Mark Chase, her 6-year-old husband, greeted us, his usual firm handshake and that smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Andrew, Linda, welcome. Come on in. We have a full house tonight," Mark said, leading us to the main room. And boy did he. 40 people, Mark's family, business partners, and faces I'd never seen before. Sarah appeared from the kitchen. She looked elegant in a navy blue dress. It probably cost more than my monthly retirement check. She gave me a brief hug. That coldness I'd noticed in the last 2 years, ever since her marriage. "Dad, Mom, leave your coats upstairs. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Her tone was polite but distant. Like we were just guests she had to invite. Linda squeezed my hand as we walked upstairs. She felt it too. That subtle, undeniable change in our daughter since she married Mark and entered the Chase social circle. The main table was a culinary work of art. A golden turkey, elaborate side dishes, wines that probably cost hundreds of dollars a bottle. I sat with Linda at one end of the table, far from the main seats where Sarah, Mark, and Stephen Chase commanded the conversation. Stephen was 65, silver hair slicked back perfectly, an Italian suit that screamed money, and the attitude of someone used to being the most important man in any room. During dinner, I listened to Stephen talk about his latest real estate acquisitions. Buildings in downtown Chicago, resorts in Florida, development projects. He talked about millions of dollars like I talked about books, with casual familiarity. The guests listened, captivated, laughing at his anecdotes, flattering him with comments about his business vision. Sarah looked at him with admiration, the same admiration she once had for me when I taught her to read, when I held her hand and took her to the public library on Saturday mornings, when I stayed up until dawn helping her with school projects. Now that look was reserved for Stephen Chase, the tycoon who represented everything I was not. The bomb dropped during dessert. Someone, a partner of Mark's named Albert, made a comment about education and financial success. "Of course, education is important," Albert said, "but in the end, what counts is business vision, instinct. Look at Stephen. He doesn't have a college degree, and look at his empire." Stephen smiled modestly. "Well, Albert, let's not discount education. It has its place. Though in my experience, college teaches you theory. Life teaches you how to make money." Laughter around the table. I felt the tension in my shoulders, but I stayed quiet. Then Sarah spoke. Her voice cut the air like a knife. "It's true, my father was a university professor his whole life. Very respectable, very noble. But the reality is, my father-in-law makes in 1 month what my father made in 10 years. She paused. That's the difference between success and failure. Between someone who understands the real world and someone who lives in theories. The silence was instant and absolute. Linda let out a small, choked sound. 40 pairs of eyes turned to me, some with pity, others with morbid curiosity, waiting to see how the old professor, humiliated by his own daughter, would react. Stephen didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable. He smiled broadly, clearly pleased with the comparison. Mark tried to laugh, to turn Sarah's poison into a joke. Well, honey, maybe that was a little harsh. But Sarah cut him off with a wave of her hand like shooing away an annoying fly. No, Mark, it's the truth. We're all adults here. We can speak honestly. She turned to me. For the first time that night, she looked me directly in the eyes. Dad, don't be offended. It's just reality. You chose a life of academic comfort, of mediocre stability. Stephen chose risk, ambition, greatness. The results speak for themselves. I froze, feeling the blood rush to my face. Linda was trembling beside me. Her hand searched for mine under the table. But before I could respond, something strange happened in my mind. I didn't feel immediate rage. I didn't want to scream. I felt a cold, crystal clarity, like when you solve a complex math problem and all the pieces suddenly click into place. Memories flooded in, not the happy ones you prefer to keep, the hard ones, the ones that hurt, the ones I had filed away because they were too heavy to carry every day. September 2004. Sarah had just turned 17. She had been accepted to a top-tier private university, prestigious, with tuition that cost $12,000 a year. Not counting books, materials, or transportation. I earned $32,000 a year as a professor. Linda worked part-time at a library, earning another $11,000. Dad, I have to go to that university, Sarah had told me that August afternoon, her eyes bright with hope. It's the best for my career. All the big business leaders studied there. Please. That night, Linda and I stayed up until 4 in the morning doing calculations at our kitchen table. In our small apartment in a working-class neighborhood. Paper after paper, full of numbers. Additions, subtractions, budgets stretched to the breaking point. The conclusion was clear. On our normal income, we couldn't afford it. But I had seen that look in my daughter's eyes. That hunger for the future. That determination. I couldn't tell her no. The next day, I started looking for extra work. I got tutoring jobs 3 afternoons a week. Then I found a position as a text editor for a publisher that paid me per project. I worked from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the university. From 4 to 7, I tutored. And from 9 at night until 1 in the morning, I corrected manuscripts. On weekends, I taught test prep classes. Linda doubled her efforts, too. She started making cakes and pies to order, working in our tiny kitchen until late at night. Her hands, which I loved so much, were covered in small burns, scars from daily battles with hot ovens and pans. She sold her creations to neighbors, offices, small cafes. Every dollar counted. For 4 years, we kept that hellish pace. 4 years without vacations, without dinners at restaurants, without new clothes, unless it was absolutely necessary. Our apartment needed urgent repairs. The pipes leaked. The paint was peeling. The water heater only worked when it wanted to. But every available dollar went straight to Sarah's education. I remember one night in December 2006, the middle of a Chicago winter. I came home past 2 in the morning after finishing an urgent correction. Linda was asleep on the sofa, wrapped in 3 blankets because we didn't want to spend money on heating. On the table was a note. Andrew, I sold 20 pies today. $650. I deposited it into Sarah's account for her books next semester. I love you, L. I sat next to her and cried in silence. I cried from exhaustion, from the sacrifice, but also from pride. We were giving our daughter something we never had, the chance to reach her dreams without limits. Or so we thought. Sarah graduated in June 2008 with honors. I had lost 18 pounds. I had the beginnings of a gastric ulcer from the stress. I looked 10 years older than I was. Linda suffered from chronic back pain from the long hours standing in the kitchen. But we were there, in the front row, watching her receive her diploma. She smiled for the photos, hugged her classmates, celebrated with her friends. She thanked us briefly. A thanks Mom and Dad tossed over her shoulder as she ran to her graduation party. We never told her the details. We never told her how many nights we skipped meals so she could attend business conferences with her peers. We never mentioned the times Linda cried from back pain but kept kneading dough because we had to make the tuition payment. We never showed her the medical bills we ignored so we could cover her academic expenses. We did the math once it was all over. Between tuition, materials, transport, and living expenses during her college years, We had invested exactly $200,300 in her education. $200,300 that represented sleepless nights, skipped meals, ignored pains, and abandoned dreams. Now, sitting in her luxury home, listening to her call me a failure in front of 40 people, all those memories weighed on my chest like stones. Slowly, I stood up. The silence in the room was so thick I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the rustle of napkins, the held breath of the guests. Linda squeezed my hand, her eyes begging me not to make a scene, to let the humiliation go just as we had let so many other things go. But something had changed in me during those 30 seconds of deathly silence. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket. I always carry certain documents with me, a meticulous professor's habit. Tonight, for reasons that now seemed like providence, I had kept some specific papers. I pulled them out slowly, unfolding them with deliberate movements as 40 pairs of eyes followed every gesture. "Sarah," I said, my voice calm, without a trace of emotion, "allow me to correct something you just said." I placed the first document on the table, right in front of her. "This is the tuition receipt for your first year at that top-tier private university, $12,000, dated September 2004. Sarah turned pale, but she kept her composure. "Dad, this isn't—" "Wait," I interrupted gently. I placed the second paper. "Second year, $12,500. Tuition went up. Third year, $13,000. Fourth year, $13,200. 4 receipts, lined up perfectly, their figures staring at her like silent accusations. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Some guests exchanged glances. Stephen stopped smiling. "But that's not all," I continued, my voice gaining strength. I pulled out another document. This one was thicker. "This is the invoice for the MBA program you took right after your bachelor's degree. A top-tier business school. 2 years, $25,000 a year, $50,000 total. Also paid, in full, by your mother and me." Linda had started to cry silently beside me, but not from shame. She was crying from pride. Pride for this man who, for 33 years, had been her partner in quiet sacrifice. "Let's add it up," I said, looking directly into my daughter's eyes. "University tuition, $50,200. Master's degree, $50,000. Total, Schuenling Arbeitmillion. But I'm not finished yet." I placed another set of papers, textbooks, $8,300 over 6 years. Academic materials, the laptop we bought you in your second year, specialized software, $12,000. Sarah had stopped trying to interrupt. Her face had lost all color. Mark was staring at the documents as if they were poisonous snakes. "Transportation," I continued, relentless. "Subway and train passes for 6 years so you could commute comfortably, $3,000. Meals, because you often stayed at the university late and needed to eat out, approximately $200 a month for 72 months, $14,400. The sound of someone swallowing hard echoed in the silence. Stephen had crossed his arms. His expression was no longer superior. It was growing uncomfortable. "Business conferences, seminars, summer courses in London that you insisted were essential for your resume." I kept pulling out more receipts. $16,000 over 3 consecutive summers. Shared housing near campus during your master's, because our family apartment was too far away. $700 a month for 24 months. $16,800. Sarah's hands were on the table, her knuckles white. "That, we get it." "No, I don't think you do," I said firmly. "For 6 years, your mother worked 16-hour days making pies and cakes to sell. Her hands—" I gently lifted Linda's hand, showing the small scars that marked decades of work. "They are marked by every burn she endured in silence, because every extra dollar meant one more book for you, one more opportunity, one less door closed in your face." Linda hid her face in my shoulder. Several guests looked down. An older woman I didn't know put her hand to her chest. I continued, worked 3 jobs simultaneously for 4 full years. I tutored every afternoon. I corrected manuscripts until 2 in the morning. On weekends, I taught test prep. I slept 4 hours a night. I developed a gastric ulcer that still bothers me. I stopped going to the doctor for checkups. Because every visit cost money we preferred to use for your education. I pulled out the last document. The most important one. It was a detailed spreadsheet I had prepared years ago, out of pure organizational habit. Total amount invested in your complete education, Sarah. $200,300. Exact. Every cent documented. Every sacrifice accounted for. I placed the sheet directly in front of her. The numbers shone under the light of the elegant chandelier. A figure that represented years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, pains endured in silence, and abandoned dreams. So when you call me a failure, my voice turned hard as steel. Remember that this failure invested a fortune to make you who you are today. That failure worked himself to death so you could have opportunities he never had. That failure chose your future over his own health, his comfort, and his well-being. The silence was deafening. Sarah stared at the papers. They were evidence of a crime, evidence of her ingratitude, her cruelty, her absolute blindness to the sacrifice that had made her every achievement possible. Stephen Chase, the real estate tycoon, the richest man in the room, was no longer smiling. He was looking at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. But I wasn't finished. I still had another document in my pocket, one I had kept with the vague hope of never having to use it. Now, looking at my daughter's shamed face, I knew it was time to expose the whole truth. "There's something else," I said, pulling out my cell phone. August of this year. Exactly 3 months ago. I swiped the screen until I found the conversation. Sarah sent me a message. It said word for word, "Dad, I need an urgent favor. Mark has an amazing investment opportunity, but we need $50,000 immediately. It's a matter of days. I promise we'll pay you back in 2 months with interest. Please, trust me." I looked up from the phone. Sarah had closed her eyes. Mark was rigid in his chair, his jaw tight. Several guests were whispering. I replied that I didn't have that amount available in cash. I continued reading. "Then you called me. Remember? You cried. You said it was the opportunity of Mark's life, that if they didn't invest that money, they would lose $1 million deal. You begged me to sell some of my retirement funds, to take out loans if necessary, to trust you." Linda squeezed my arm. She knew what was coming. We had argued about it for weeks. "I sold my investment funds," I said flatly. 2 decades of careful savings. Funds I had saved for our retirement, for medical emergencies, for the old age that is approaching. $50,000. Transferred to your account on August 20th, 2022. I placed my phone on the table, showing the bank transfer confirmation. The date shined on the screen. The 20th of August, 2022. Recipient, Sarah Miller Chase. Amount, $50,000. "You promised to pay it back in 2 months, I said, looking directly at Sarah. "That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't received a cent. Not even a call explaining the delay. Nothing." Mark tried to intervene. "Andrew, the project got complicated. There were delays." Silence. I cut him off harshly. "I'm not talking to you yet." I turned my attention back to Sarah. "You know what I did after transferring that money? I called Julian Shaw, my lawyer friend. I asked him to discreetly investigate this $1 million opportunity." Mark's face lost all trace of color. Stephen leaned forward, suddenly very interested. "Julian discovered some fascinating things," I continued, enjoying the total control of the situation for the first time that night. "It turns out that Chase Developments, your dear husband's company, has debts of almost $2 million. Abandoned projects in Florida, investors suing for breach of contract, 3 pending lawsuits for business fraud." Now, the panic was visible on Mark's face. Stephen had stood up, looking at his son with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "The $50,000 you asked me for," I said to Sarah, "wasn't for an investment. It was to pay lawyers, to try to silence lawsuits, to plug holes in a sinking ship. And I, the old failed professor, financed your husband's desperate attempt to keep up appearances." Several guests began to get up, murmuring excuses. Clearly uncomfortable. A couple near the door simply left without saying goodbye. "Dad, I didn't know," Sarah began, her voice trembling. "You didn't know?" I interrupted her with a bitter laugh. "You didn't know your husband is broke? You didn't know you lied to me about the purpose of the money? Or did you just not know that you never intended to pay it back?" Stephen had circled the table and was now confronting Mark directly. Is this true? 2 million in debt? Lawsuits for fraud? Mark stammered, searching for words that wouldn't come. His empire of lies was crumbling in real time. There's more, I said, pulling out another document. 2 weeks ago, on October 23rd, Sarah came to visit us. Remember that afternoon, dear? I looked at Linda, who nodded, tears falling. She asked us for another $30,000. She said it was to remodel the kitchen in this house. I told her no, that we didn't have any more money available. She got angry. Accused me of being cheap, of not supporting my own family. Sarah hid her face in her hands. Her body was shaking. What Sarah didn't know, I continued, relentless, is that Julian had discovered something else. On September 30th, 1 month after receiving my $50,000, she and Mark bought a new BMW, value $65,000. They paid $40,000 as a down payment. Where did that money come from, Sarah? The silence was absolute. You used our retirement money, my voice broke for the first time that night, to buy a luxury car. While your mother and I eat lentils 4 days a week to save money. While we postpone necessary doctor visits because we no longer have that financial cushion. While we live with the anxiety of not knowing how we'll face future emergencies. Sarah was sobbing openly now. Mark remained motionless, trapped. Stephen was looking at his son with pure disgust. And I, the failed professor, stood before 40 witnesses, exposing the truth my daughter had tried to bury under layers of shame and contempt. Linda and I left the dinner that night without trying the dessert. We walked to our modest 2010 sedan, while the remaining guests watched us from the illuminated windows of the house. No one tried to stop us. No one apologized. The silence we left behind was heavier than any word. During the drive home, neither of us spoke. Linda looked out the window, occasionally drying her tears. I drove with my hands firm on the wheel, but inside, I felt something fundamental had broken. It wasn't just the relationship with my daughter. It was the image I had built for 34 years. The illusion that sacrifice is always valued. That unconditional love is returned. We arrived at our apartment in our working-class neighborhood past 11. We walked up the stairs in silence. That 800-square-foot apartment had been our home for 38 years. The walls had cracks we never repaired because the money always had more urgent destinations. The kitchen had the same tiles from 1993. The sofa was worn. Linda made chamomile tea. We sat on that old sofa and we finally spoke. You did the right thing, Linda said, her voice soft but firm. She needed to hear those truths. Everyone needed to hear them. I don't feel satisfied, I admitted. Just empty, like I lost my daughter for good tonight. Andrew, Linda turned to me, taking my face in her work-worn hands. You lost Sarah a long time ago, ever since she married Mark and entered that world of appearances and money. The girl we raised, the one who read stories curled up on your lap, she disappeared. What we saw tonight was just the confirmation of something we both knew, but didn't want to accept. She was right. The signs had been there for years. The visits growing further apart, the superficial conversations, the way Sarah looked at our humble apartment with something close to shame, the forgotten birthdays, the broken promises. The next day, November 25th, I did something I had been postponing. I called Julian Shaw and asked him to come to the house. Julian was 58. He had been my student 3 decades ago. Now he was one of the most respected civil lawyers in Chicago. He arrived at 10 a.m. Andrew, Linda, he greeted us. I completed the investigation you asked for, and what I found is worse than we imagined. He placed several documents on our dining table. Deeds, contracts, official forms. Let's start with the basics, Julian said. Chase Developments is technically bankrupt. Mark has debts with 7 different banks. The projects in Florida were abandoned, leaving investors out $1.8 million. We knew that, I said impatiently. What else? Julian exchanged a look with Linda. I found something that directly involves your assets. On September 16th, 3 weeks after you transferred the $50,000 to Sarah, she went to a Bank of America branch downtown. She applied for a $120,000 loan. And what does that have to do with us? Linda asked, though her voice trembled. She used this apartment as collateral, Julian replied, placing a document in front of us. It was a loan application. In the collateral section, clearly written, was our address. The room began to spin. Linda put her hand to her chest, struggling to breathe. That's impossible, I managed to say. This apartment is in our name. She can't use it as collateral without our authorization. Julian nodded grimly. Exactly. Which is why what she did is document forgery, a serious felony. Sarah presented falsified documents where you supposedly authorized the use of the property as collateral. There are signatures that look like yours. Forged notary seals. A whole criminal structure. My God, Linda whispered. Our own daughter. The bank approved the loan, Julian continued. Sarah received $120,000 on September 22nd. Of that, $40,000 was used for the BMW. The rest went to cover Mark's urgent debts. I felt sick. My daughter had committed fraud, risking the only home Linda and I had. What does this mean for us? I asked. If Sarah doesn't pay that loan, and it looks like she can't, the bank will execute the collateral. They will foreclose on and auction this apartment to recover their money. Linda began to sob. 38 years in that home, and our daughter had risked it all to leave us homeless in our old age. There's more, Julian added, his expression even darker. Sarah also applied for another personal loan of $30,000 at Wells Fargo, using falsified documents stating you would co-sign. That bank is currently verifying, and they will soon discover the fraud. I stood up, unable to sit. I walked to the window. What are our options? I asked Julian. Julian opened another folder. Read. Option 1. File a criminal complaint for document forgery and fraud. It's the correct legal route. Sarah would face criminal charges, possibly 2 to 6 years. The loans would be nullified, and your apartment would be protected. And option 2? Linda asked. Try to resolve this privately. Confront Sarah. Demand she find a way to pay the banks, but it's risky. If the banks discover the fraud first, they will press charges themselves, and Sarah will face even more serious charges. I turned to Linda. I could read every emotion on her face. Pain, betrayal, but also determination. She nodded slightly. She knew what we had to do. File the complaint, I told Julian. Today, if possible. Andrew, Julian closed the folders. I understand you're furious, but think about the consequences. It's your daughter. A criminal conviction will destroy her life. She destroyed hers when she decided to commit fraud, I answered harshly. And she almost destroyed ours. I will not let Linda and I lose our home because Sarah chose to live above her means and marry a con artist. Julian was silent, then nodded. I'll draft the complaint this afternoon. I need you both to come to my office tomorrow to sign it. After Julian left, Linda and I sat in that apartment that suddenly felt so fragile. The phone rang that afternoon. An unknown number. Andrew Miller? The voice was male, professional. Yes, who is this? My name is Jack Price. I'm a private investigator. I have information about Mark Chase that might interest you. My pulse quickened. Go on. I've been investigating Mr. Chase for 3 months. My client is one of the defrauded investors from the Florida project. I discovered Mark's history is much darker. What do you mean? Before he met your daughter, Mark was married. His first wife, Nicole Price, reported him for psychological abuse and stealing shared funds. The case was settled out of court with an NDA that Mark paid for with his father's money. I felt the floor move. Are you sure? Completely. I have copies. But there's more. Mark has a history of 2 previous businesses that went bankrupt. Why am I telling you this? Because my client believes you are also victims, and because I have evidence that Stephen Chase has been covering up his son's failures for years. Mark's empire is a facade, held up by his father's money. That night, I reviewed every page Jack sent. Lawsuits, broken contracts, secret payoffs. The man Sarah married was a professional liar, a serial con artist. And the most painful part, Sarah had to know. She had chosen to become his accomplice. On November 27th, 2 days after the disastrous dinner, Stephen Chase called me. His voice sounded tired. Andrew, I need to talk to you. In private. We agreed to meet at a neutral cafe near Lincoln Park. He sat across from me. I investigated what you said at dinner. Every word was true, wasn't it? Everyone, I confirmed. Stephen sighed. I knew nothing about Mark's real debts. He showed me fake balance sheets. I was just covering holes. And now what? I asked. Are you here to ask me to drop the complaint I filed yesterday for the forgery? Stephen looked up sharply. You filed a complaint? Of course. Your daughter-in-law put my apartment up as collateral for fraudulent loans. I won't let Linda and I lose our home for the crimes of your son and my daughter. For the first time, I saw genuine respect in Stephen's eyes. You did the right thing. I cut Mark off this morning. I told him to sink or swim. He won't get another dollar from me. Too late, I replied bitterly. The damage is done. Stephen nodded. I know, and I deeply regret helping create this monster. While you sacrificed your health to educate Sarah, I ruined my son with excess. We sat in silence. Two fathers, from opposite ends of the economic spectrum, both confronting the failure of our children. Sarah appeared at our door on the morning of December 2nd. She just hammered on the door until Linda opened it. She stormed in like a hurricane. Hair messy, no makeup, wearing wrinkled clothes. Dad, you have to drop the charges, she said without even a hello. They're going to arrest me. The bank's lawyers notified me yesterday. They said if I don't return the $120,000 in 10 days, they'll press additional charges. I sat on the sofa, motionless. Good morning, Sarah, I said coldly. What a surprise. I don't have time for formalities, she snapped. I need you to talk to your lawyer. Tell him it was a misunderstanding, that you gave me verbal authorization. You want me to commit perjury? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. To become an accomplice to your fraud by lying under oath. Sarah collapsed into the armchair. You don't know what's happening. Mark disappeared. He hasn't been home in 3 days. His father cut him off. Creditors are calling constantly. 2 men came yesterday threatening to repossess our furniture. Your fantasy world collapsed, I observed, without compassion. Welcome to the reality the rest of us live in. How can you be so cruel? She yelled, her eyes red and swollen. I'm your daughter. You're supposed to protect me. Linda finally spoke, her voice trembling with rage. We helped you for 34 years, Sarah. We gave you everything. We worked until we destroyed our health. We sacrificed our dreams, our well-being, our future, and you repaid us by calling your father a failure. You repaid us by stealing our home to finance a fake lifestyle. I didn't want to do it, Sarah sobbed. Mark pressured me. He said it was temporary. I trusted him. Just like we trusted you, I said, standing up. And look at you now, crying, begging, looking for us to rescue a situation you created with lies and fraud. I walked to my room and returned with a brown folder. This, I said, pointing to the first document, is my updated will, signed 2 days ago. You have been removed as a beneficiary of all my assets. My share of this apartment, my remaining savings, everything will go to an educational foundation I am establishing. Sarah turned pale. You can't do that. It's done. The Miller Ruiz Foundation. It will grant scholarships to the children of professors. That will be my true legacy. Not an ungrateful daughter, but hundreds of young people who will value the opportunity. This second document, I continued, is the change to my life insurance. Linda is now the sole beneficiary. When she passes, it also goes to the foundation. You will inherit absolutely nothing from us, Sarah. She staggered to her feet. You're punishing me for a mistake, for trusting the wrong person. No, I corrected her harshly. I am holding you accountable for conscious decisions. You knew Mark was a con artist. His first marriage ended in lawsuits for abuse and fraud. You chose to ignore it because you were blinded by his name and his apparent money. I was 26 when I met him. She defended herself weakly. I was young. You were 28 when you married him, Linda interrupted, old enough to do research. And you were 34 when you forged our signatures to steal our apartment. That isn't youth. That is deliberate criminality. Sarah tried to approach me, but I flinched and stepped back. Something in that gesture broke her completely. She fell to her knees on our worn carpet, the same carpet she played on as a child. Please, she begged. If they convict me, I'll go to prison. My life will be ruined forever. I knelt in front of her, forcing her to look at me. Your life is already ruined, Sarah. You ruined it when you chose material values over integrity. Prison is just the legal consequence. The real consequence is that you lost your parents forever. Don't say that, she pleaded, grabbing my shirt. We can get through this. I can change. I'll find honest work. Give me a chance. I gently removed her hands and stood up. You had 34 years of chances. You wasted every one. There will be no more. Linda opened the apartment door. The message was clear. Sarah stood up slowly. If you don't drop the charges, she said, her voice broken, I'll see you in court, and I'll tell my version. I'll say you knew about the loan, that you gave me verbal permission. Go ahead, I replied calmly. Lie under oath. Add perjury to your charges. Sink your own ship even deeper. Julian has bank documents with dates, graphology analysis, and testimony from the notary. Your lie will only make your legal situation worse. Sarah walked to the door. She stopped in the threshold. Someday, you'll regret this. When you're old and sick, alone, you'll remember this moment. Linda spoke then, with a firmness I hadn't heard in years. We are 60 years old, Sarah. We are already old. We would rather spend our remaining years alone, but with dignity, than accompanied by someone who despises us and steals from us. Go now, and don't come back, unless it's to take full responsibility for your actions without excuses. Sarah left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like thunder. Linda and I stood motionless for a long time. The following months passed in a blur of court dates and meetings with Julian. Finally, on May 15th, 2023, the trial began. The courtroom was cold. Linda and I sat in the front row. At 10 a.m., Sarah entered. She looked at me. There was no pleading in her eyes. No tears. Just a new hardness. Judge Raymond Carter entered. Severe expression. A reputation for being fair, but relentless with fraud. The charges were read. Forgery of public documents, aggravated fraud, misappropriation. The prosecutor, Melinda Lawson, presented the evidence. The bank documents, the handwriting analysis. The defendant, the prosecutor said, did not act out of desperation. Phone records show she called multiple banks comparing loan conditions. This shows premeditation, deliberate planning. She knew exactly what she was doing. Sarah's lawyer, Frank Barnes, tried to build a defense based on coercion. My client was a victim of psychological manipulation by her husband, Mark Chase. She acted under duress. The prosecutor demolished that argument. If Mrs. Chase was being coerced, why didn't she go to the authorities? Why not seek help from her parents, the very people whose property she was risking? Text messages show active complicity. In one, she wrote, got approval from BOFA, 120K, let's celebrate tonight. Those are not the words of a coerced victim. I was called to testify. I swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor's questions were direct. Did I authorize the loan? No. Did I have prior knowledge? No. Were the signatures mine? No. Barnes, on cross-examination. Isn't it true you had a tense relationship with your daughter? The relationship had cooled, I admitted, but that doesn't justify fraud. Isn't it possible? You mentioned she could use the property if she ever needed help. Never, I said firmly. That apartment is the only asset my wife and I own. We would never, under any circumstances, have offered it as collateral. Linda testified after me. Her voice trembled, but she told them about the years of sacrifice and the betrayal. Then Sarah took the stand. She told a story where she was the victim. I loved my husband, she said. I trusted him blindly when he told me we needed those loans. I just wanted to help. I didn't think. I wasn't considering I was committing a crime. The prosecutor destroyed her. Mrs. Chase, you have an MBA from a prestigious institution. Are you telling me? You didn't understand that forging bank documents is a serious crime? Sarah hesitated. Mark assured me it was just a temporary formality. A formality? The prosecutor raised her voice. Forging your parents' signatures? Submitting fraudulent documents? Risking the home of the people who sacrificed everything for you? That was just a formality? I didn't want to hurt them, Sarah whispered. But you did. And when your father discovered the fraud, you threatened to lie under oath. We have a record of that conversation. Was that also part of your role as a victim? Sarah didn't answer. She looked down, defeated. The trial lasted 3 days. They even presented recorded statements from Mark. The police had found him hiding in Las Vegas. Mark had flipped completely. He confirmed Sarah knew exactly what she was doing, that it was a shared idea, that they had planned it together. On May 30th, the judge delivered the verdict. This court finds Sarah Miller Chase guilty of forgery of public documents, aggravated fraud, and misappropriation. The sentence is 4 years in prison, and the obligation to restitute the full amount of $150,000. Sarah collapsed in her chair. Linda and I walked out of the courthouse in total silence. We had won, legally, but the victory tasted like ash. During the following weeks, life continued. Sarah was transferred to the state penitentiary to begin her sentence. Mark received 6 years. Stephen Chase disappeared from public life, shamed by the scandal. Linda and I made a decision. One night in June, she took my hand. We need to leave, Andrew. This apartment is full of ghosts. Every corner reminds me of the girl Sarah used to be. I can't keep living with these painful memories. She was right. In July, we put the apartment up for sale. We found a buyer in 3 weeks, a young couple with a baby. We sold it for $185,000. With that money, plus our savings, we had enough for a new start. We wanted to get away from Chicago. Savannah, Georgia called to us. Linda had been born there. She still had distant cousins in the area. She had always dreamed of returning. We found a 700-square-foot condo in a historic, vibrant neighborhood. It cost $120,000. We bought it outright. The move was strangely liberating. Packing up 38 years of life forced us to confront every object. We donated furniture, clothes, books. We only kept the essentials. The photographs of Sarah were the hardest. Linda spent an afternoon looking at them, crying silently. Sarah as a baby. Sarah at her graduation. Do we keep them or throw them away? Linda asked. I thought carefully. Keep them, not for her, for us. They are evidence that we were good parents, that we loved unconditionally. Her failure doesn't erase the years we did everything right. We packed the photos in a sealed box, in the back of a closet in the new condo. We settled in Savannah during September 2023. Our neighborhood was vibrant, multicultural. No one knew our story. No one looked at us with pity. We were just Andrew and Linda. Linda found a book club at the library. I joined a volunteer group teaching English to immigrants twice a week. We used the remaining money for something we never allowed ourselves: travel. In October, we went to Portugal. In November, we visited Paris. In December, we explored Andalusia. Each trip was an act of reclaiming the time we had sacrificed. Sarah tried to contact us from prison. Letters arrived. The first 4 letters I burned without opening. Linda begged me to read the 5th. I opened it one afternoon in January 2024. Sarah wrote about regret, about therapy, about understanding how her decisions had destroyed everything. She begged for forgiveness. What do we do? Linda asked. I folded the letter. Nothing. We let her serve her sentence. Let her experience the full consequences. Maybe in the future, when she has proven genuine change through actions, we can consider limited contact. But not now. She is still manipulating. Linda nodded. In February 2024, we formally established the Miller-Ruiz Foundation. Julian helped with the legal paperwork. We dedicated $80,000 as seed capital. The first scholarships were awarded in June 2024. 3 bright young students. Seeing them smile, hearing their sincere thanks, it healed something deep inside me. The encounter happened without warning. It was a morning in January 2024. 6 months after our move, I had gone out to buy fresh vegetables at the local market. A weekly routine. I was examining some tomatoes when a familiar voice, but transformed, made me turn. Andrew? I turned. There, by the organic vegetable stall, was Sarah. But not the elegant Sarah, not the desperate Sarah from the trial. This was a different version. Hair short, undyed, showing premature gray. A face without makeup, marked by lines of exhaustion. Simple clothes. looked second-hand. She was wearing the green employee apron. A name tag said, Sarah, Produce Section. My first instinct was to turn and leave. But something in her expression stopped me. There was no pleading, no manipulation, just genuine surprise, and maybe shame. "Hello," I finally said, my voice neutral. "I didn't expect to find you here," she said. "I thought you were still in Chicago." "We moved 6 months ago. Linda and I started a new life in Savannah." Sarah nodded slowly. "I got out on parole last month. Good behavior, participation in rehab programs. They reduced my sentence to 2.5 years. I didn't respond. I just watched her. I've worked here for 3 weeks," she continued. "It's the only job I could get. My criminal record makes it impossible to find work in my field. No firm will hire me. So I'm here, weighing tomatoes and cleaning lettuce for $1,000 a month." "It's honest work," I said, without emotion. "More honest than forging documents." Sarah flinched. "You're right. I deserve your contempt. I deserve worse." A customer approached. Sarah excused herself and helped them. She weighed carrots, bagged peppers, and took their money with genuine kindness. When the customer left, she turned back to me. "How is Mom?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "She's well. Happy. We've traveled more in these 6 months than in the last 30 years. We established that educational foundation. We give scholarships. Our life is simple, but it's dignified." Sarah swallowed, visibly. "I'm glad, really. You deserve to be happy, after everything I did." "Where do you live?" I asked, not sure why I was continuing. "I share a flat with 2 other girls in a cheaper part of town. $300 a month for rent. I bike to work. I mostly eat rice and lentils, because meat is too expensive." She paused. "Ironic, right? Now I live exactly like you lived while I was studying at my expensive university. I finally understand what every dollar you spent on me meant." "Understanding often comes late," I observed. Another customer arrived. Then another. Sarah worked diligently. I should have left, but I stayed, watching this stranger who wore my daughter's face. When it was quiet again, Sarah spoke. "Mark is still in prison. He has 3.5 years left. His father died last August. Massive heart attack. The stress and shame killed him. He left all his money to charity. Mark inherited nothing." "Consequences," I said simply. "Yes." Sarah finally looked me in the eyes. "Consequences. I'm officially divorced. I lost everything. My house, my car, my savings, my reputation, my freedom, my family. Everything I built on lies collapsed. Exactly like you warned me it would. And now what?" I asked. Sarah shrugged. "Survive. Work. Pay my debts, though it will take me decades. Learn to live with real humility. Maybe someday, if I work very hard and show genuine change for years, you might consider letting me be part of your lives again. But I don't expect it. I have no right to." A large group of customers arrived. I used that moment to walk away. Sarah saw me leave, but she didn't try to stop me. She just raised a hand in a silent goodbye. I walked home in a daze. I didn't know what to do with the contradictory emotions boiling inside me. Linda was making coffee. One look at my face was enough. What happened? I told her everything. The chance encounter, the conversation, the visible transformation. Linda listened in silence. "What do you feel?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me feels satisfaction, seeing her experience the consequences. Another part, the part that still remembers being her father, feels pain." "Do you think her change is genuine?" "It's too soon to tell," I reflected. "Words are easy. Verbal repentance is cheap. What matters are actions, sustained over years. If in 2, 3, 5 years she is still living with integrity, then maybe. But not now." Linda nodded. "I agree. We can't open that door yet. The risk of being manipulated again is too high. We need to protect ourselves." That night I wrote in my journal. I documented the encounter, my decision to keep my distance, but not to close the door completely on the distant future. March 2024. It's been 16 months since that Thanksgiving dinner. I'm sitting on the balcony of our condo in Savannah. Linda is in the kitchen preparing her famous low country boil, a recipe she learned from her grandmother. The life we built here is radically different. We live on our pensions, $2,300 a month combined. It's enough, more than enough. Because we've learned that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in peace of mind. The Miller-Ruiz Foundation has become the legacy I am genuinely proud of. This year, we'll grant scholarships to 5 students instead of 3. I've seen Sarah 3 more times since that first meeting. Always casual, brief. In February, I saw her leaving the public library. In March, we were in line at the same discount supermarket. Each time, we exchange polite, distant greetings. She never asks for anything. She never tries to force a conversation. She simply exists in her new, humble reality. Linda and I have agreed. We will maintain this distance for at least 3 more years. We want to see genuine consistency, not temporary regret. If in 2027 Sarah is still working honestly, living with integrity, then maybe we can consider some limited form of reconciliation. But it will be conditional, never a return to the blind trust we once had. I learned painful lessons. I learned that unconditional love does not mean tolerating abuse or exploitation. I learned that being a good parent includes setting firm limits when your children choose destructive paths. I learned that sacrifice only has value when it is valued by the receiver. I also learned about my own strength. I was able to prioritize my well-being and Linda's over the emotional comfort of my daughter. Linda has flourished in Savannah. The woman who spent decades selling pies now paints watercolors. She attends pottery workshops. She leads a book club. She recovered parts of herself that she had buried under years of sacrifice. Our travels continue. In April, we'll visit Morocco. In July, we have a cruise planned to the Greek islands. In October, we'll explore Scotland. Each trip is an act of reclamation. Occasionally, I feel a pang of sadness when I see families in parks. Grandparents playing with grandchildren. That's a scene I'll never experience. But I've learned to accept that reality without bitterness. The scar remains. There are moments when I hear a song Sarah loved as a child, and the pain resurges. But the moments become less frequent. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it makes them easier to carry. If I could speak to other parents, I would say this. True love includes limits. Sacrificing for your children is noble, until it becomes self-destruction. When an adult child chooses to exploit you, manipulate you, betray you, you have the obligation to protect yourself. You are not a bad parent for setting consequences. You are a parent who finally understands that raising responsible adults sometimes requires letting them experience the full weight of their wrong decisions. The sun is setting completely now. Rosa calls me from inside. The low country boil is ready. Tonight, we'll eat on our small balcony, toasting with cheap wine, talking about the book we're both reading, planning our next trip. Our life is small by the standards of the world Sarah chose. But it is deeply our own, deeply authentic, deeply enough. And that, I've discovered, is more valuable than any empire built on lies and appearances. If you liked this story, give the video a like, subscribe to William's Revenge Stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thanks for watching.